Everyone, I'm with a very interesting gentleman I've met here in Saussure. He's from Canada, called Maury. Thanks for jumping on camera, Maury.
You're welcome. Nice to speak with you, Mr. T.
Nice to have you here. Now, just for the viewers to know why I found it interesting to get you on camera, I mean, I like getting lots of people on camera, but we clicked very quickly on the same walkie-talkie channel there about the sovereignty of human beings and what governments have done to us way back in history that actually makes us slaves of the state. So I'm just going to let you introduce yourself a little bit more and then explain exactly what it is that we should be aware of, Maury.
Right. Well, I'd like to say that, first of all, I appreciate that we're compadres in a number of areas. I think, you know, I've been a subscriber of yours for, 2-3 years, and quite appreciate and I'm aligned, I would say, with the interest in raising consciousness to address problems, not necessarily just whine and complain, but see if there's possible solutions.
Thank you for being subscribed and tuning in often.
Right.
Yeah, so let's just talk about this whole thing about being a slave of a state. In writing, what is it that makes us actually belong to the state, which in reality we don't even have to?
Well, right. I think that the thing to notice, and you can do your own research on this, is that the basic definition of law is agreement of the parties. And then nations are generated through a kind of a contract. We call it a constitution. And people somewhat sign up to it. But it's become unconscious. And we live in a time, I think, where institutions are out of control. We see all kinds of problems with the way institutions work. But if you understand the mechanism, you can get down to the fundamental common denominator and resolve the situation for yourself. And remember, you're the creator. You're the one that governments were created to, or us as individuals are the source of where governments come from. It's not the other way around. Mm-hmm. Governments don't tell us what to do. We tell them what to do.
That's how it should be.
Well, that's how it should be, yeah. And we're lost in all of that. We live in a time where institutions are out of control.
So it's the tail now wagging the dog instead of the dog wagging the tail.
Correctly spoken, I think. Wag the Dog is a great movie, by the way, addressing some of those things.
Very good. So let's get into the nitty-gritty. Birth certificates. We are on what's called maritime law, is that right?
Well, yeah. Basically, the basis of law is agreement of the parties. But you have to have evidence for a law or an agreement. That means something needs to be written on paper. It needs to be written in a language, and it needs to say something. And then a contract has a bunch of fundamental requirements, which is there's consideration due. In other words, there needs to be exchange of value in a contract. Back to the birth certificate. Our parents signed us up not knowing that a whole set of obligations are created. And then the education system doesn't inform you that when you come of age, the age of consent, notice, that's a point regarding contract. It's evidence of a meeting of the parties. But, you know, a contract has to be on paper and it has to be recorded in a way that it's evidence. Otherwise, you can't have a court, you can't have a judge if there's no evidence. So, spoken contract, we're confused in our education that something is really there. Nothing's there in a spoken word. It's all what's on paper. And the first paper is your birth certificate.
So, explain to the viewers, please, the maritime law that falls under. Comes back to when a ship is unloading stock in a harbor, it's giving birth to that stock, and that's kind of what where the birth certificate came from, isn't it?
Correct. There's a joinder in the meaning of the word birth, birthing, courts are vessels in dry dock. That whole world of courts, documentation is shipping. But more fundamentally, that's the law of the sea. Admiralty law, maritime law, commercial law. These are all the same package. The flip side of it is the law of the land. You don't have to have documentation on the land. You can do whatever you want, swing your arms all you want. The violation becomes when I contact and impinge on your space or your well-being or your possessions. But there's two jurisdictions there, the law of the sea, the law of the land. The laws of the sea is where you have to have all the documentation in place, your ship's papers, know about porting, shipping lanes, how all that global international law works. But on the law of the land, nobody needs any of that. There's only a problem if I violate your rights or space or...
So, if I understand it correctly, when somebody signs a birth certificate for their child, it's like somebody signing stock onto the harbor or dropping off stock. So how can we disconnect from that? If we want to opt out and say, well, I don't want to be under maritime law, I'm a man of the land.
Well,
how do you do that then?
The first thing is just the knowledge to know how to distinguish. You don't really want to get rid of commerce because we still operate in the world. We're in this weird time where there's a significant interruption in the shipping, in the air. The airlines are significantly going to curtail operations. That may be, that's going to be a huge impact on the world economies. More impact than we've seen in even the First and Second World War. When you collapse transportation and shipping. So you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but you do want to know the difference because what? Knowledge is power. I think you and I share the interest in raising awareness, raising consciousness, such that solutions are available rather than just being stuck with the problem.
Yeah. There's a guy I watched, he's from Australia, and I'm going to try to put it on the screen because sitting here right now I can't remember his name. It's some Italian sounding name, so if you see it on the bottom of the screen right now, that means I've been editing and put it in here. But it's outside Melbourne Court, and he's just been in there and slam dunked the judges legally because he knows his stuff and he knows what his rights are. And there's a form he covers that you can actually get with, and together with your lawyer you can actually disconnect from being under maritime law. And I think it's something called paper of birth or something like that.
A claim of the live life, or live life claim. That's what the document is. So that you stand on your knowledge, write your basic footing or your standing in court, the terms that they use. But I caution you, your lawyer is never there to help. His oath is to the court. He's happy that you pay him. But he's not there to help. He's there for the preservation of the court.
So we should listen to you and a guy like the one from Melbourne, and then go in and tell the lawyer what to do, and then pay him or her to actually perform what they need to perform. Yeah,
you need to have your evidence in place, though. Because without evidence, all the blah, blah, blah that goes in court, that's the hand-waving. What really goes on court is the flow of the documents. The controller of the court is the clerk of the court. The judge is an actor in dry dock. He's a fiction. So there's a bunch of mechanics. There's really sort of two venues to learn about. One is the grammar of language and how you document your evidence. Two is the shipping and postal mechanics of how the evidence is lodged. They're both fairly large areas of learning, but I know of a guy in Australia, and I don't know if it's probably not the same guy, but who got himself in trouble in an Australian court when he was charging a doctor for malpractice in a surgical situation. But he was going into court to deal with that, and he had a little thing bought at the dollar store, a little plastic keychain thing, and it had a little Teflon pin on it, or a titanium pin, and a razor blade for cutting a seatbelt in a injury situation. He was charged with trying to sneak in lethal weapons into the court. Now, he heard about this group that I studied with, and in less than a week, he had documents filed, and when he showed up in court the next time, the prosecutor was shaking. The judge didn't say a word, and the prosecutor essentially pulled him aside and said, look, we'll drop everything here, just as long as you promise not to charge us. So you promise not to follow through on your paperwork.
What a bunch of parasites.
Well, absolutely. The whole legal system has 1,000 or 2,000 years of deception built in. Legal language is intentionally designed so no one can make any sense of it. A fact cannot be found, and that can be proven in the rules of English grammar, plus can be easily translated into the hundreds of different languages that courts operate in.
So every day around the world, people are in court fighting to get out of some kind of complications that often have been caused by the actual system. So how many of these cases are legit or should even be happening?
Well, that's a challenging question because, one, the court system in the world right now is based on fraudulent conveyance of language, fraud grammar. They're set up so that you have no idea what they're talking about, even if you think so. The other side of it is, well, the courts and nations were created to resolve problems for people. But we now have come to a time that's all matured. You know, the Buddhist prayer wheel is after spring comes summer, after summer comes fall, and after that it's winter. We're in the winter of the national law, courts, just us. Is not about equity anymore. It's about just us. Meaning some people in the very background, like the Wizard of Oz, hiding behind a curtain.
Right. So talking about how to disconnect, because what I've found in my life that's made me happier than anything else is to disconnect from people or entities that don't mean me well. Because most people, let's face it, are either for you or against you. They mean you well or they want something unearned from you. How does one disconnect legally so you can actually go to borders and you can show your document? I mean, you just showed me your passport, and in that passport it's got a postal stamp. Maybe you just care to show that and explain that for the viewers.
Well, the basis of all of this, though, starts with knowledge. You need to know how to operate the document. So, I don't know if you can see that there, and you could probably edit out some of the details for me, since I don't want this a public document. That's enough, right? Okay.
That's a nice postage stamp. Who put that there?
I did.
And they have sometimes, or do they every time, question you about it?
Not every time, 50% of the time, but it's not coming into the Dominican Republic, for example, where we are right now. It's returning to my home country. But the point of it is that the post is the basis of the filing of a constitution and national law. So there's an international legal structure in Bern, Switzerland, called the United Postal Union, and that's where the post is the senior witness to contract. Hence, anybody's done in business and been in courts, you may be familiar that registered mail is the senior form of service. The post is senior, and being the postmaster on a contract means you're the one who's charged or obligated to manage and direct the contents of that vessel. Any contract on paper is a vessel and a court with its cargo of information, language. Being the postmaster means you have the right to direct it, and fee for freight on the contract, shipping has been paid. So a contract is already in place and obligations are already due.
So have you had situations like in airports where they challenged that and then you used your knowledge to win free passage?
I think that the quickest and simplest one starts with just the name. A quick reference we talked about earlier, The Wizard of Oz. Dorothy finds herself swept off the land, no more law of the land, into the clouds, feet up off the ground, and she has to find the Wizard of Oz, O-Z, in capitals, a name and a ship, in lowercase, ounces, O-Z period, is the abbreviation for ounces. Follow the yellow brick road, follow the money. Okay, we're off on a sidetrack there. I had a situation, I have a dog back home, and the dog somehow bit somebody. Okay, I tried to negotiate resolution, settlement. You know, how do I solve this? The person that I had the problem with all of a sudden decided, no, I'm going to go to the officials. So an animal control officer shows up at my house hearing a dog barking in the backyard. I look out the window, there's an animal control officer in the front yard. Okay, I go to the backyard, put him inside the house, go out and talk to the person. Okay, what's your name? I said, I'm happy to give your name and I'd like to resolve this. But if you change my name, you've converted. Conversion under 322 of the Canada Criminal Code is a crime. Conversion is like theft. You change who's in possession of property. That's conversion. But changing my name, so I gave my name in the correct sentence structure format with grammar so that my name becomes a full sentence and therefore a fact. Not just the nom de guerre, you can look it up in the legal dictionary, your name in war, with capitalization and there's distinctions in citizenship just on how your name is printed. But I gave my name, full colon, Maury, hyphen William, full colon, Shapka. And I said, if you change that, you know you're in violation of 322 of the Criminal Code. Correct? I never heard from them again.
What did he say in that moment?
Well, at that moment they went, okay, and they continued to fill out the report. But they were there to give me a fine for no permit on the dog any longer because it had expired 5 years ago when my wife left. And to try and, charge me with, having a dangerous animal or something like that. Did
you have to show your passport?
Actually, I don't think I did. I can't remember. I might have given my driver's license as well. But my driver's license has my name with an autograph and a postage stamp on the back of it as well as postmaster of the document.
Very interesting.
Driver's license is equivalent of a credit card. You give it to the police officer or whoever officer, that was an animal control department officer, they use it to lay charges, just like a Visa card. When court documents are filed, securities are put in place. There's a whole paper trail through your birth certificate, your driver's license, and your social insurance number in Canada, Social Security in the United States, but your tax entity.
So this postal stamp, could that be any post stamp?
There's some requirements in Admiralty. Admiralty requires integers. It can't be fractional. So it can't be $1.50 or whatever. So it's a $1 postage stamp, or here in the Dominican Republic I buy 25 or 50 pesos, but there's no fraction or decimal on the stamp. Secondly, it's the national postage. It's not necessarily just any stamp. But keep in mind, and you'll, if you ever seen any legal stuff going on in Russia, even the rubber stamp of a corporation is postal. The customs stamp is postal. Autographing through there with knowledge and with your name correct to your claim of the live life is the basic documents. You're always collecting evidence.
So in what situations, having this postal stamp on your main IDs there, would it be handy where you can use it, like, I don't want to use the word counter weapon, but I will, but when can you use it as a tool to free yourself of their bureaucracy or their fines or whatever they may try to throw at you?
Well, the challenge is officers and entities operating in uniforms. They're not operating as people. They're actors in the fiction.
Policy enforcers.
Policy enforcers. That's why it says police. Policy
Yeah.
on they enforce contract for the government. It's the military that protects people. So that's a whole other level of legal distinction. But you ask me a question of essentially what's the benefit? Where do you use your claim of the live life, which is the replacement for your birth certificate? It's a foundational document, and you have to collect your records. That an entity, whether it's the tax department or the customs or whatever, they pull you aside or send you mail, it's going to be a document of some sort. Now you have to have knowledge as to what that document is being sent to you, because it's an offer. They want you to sign at the bottom, depending on the jurisdiction and the department. What's that signature? It's evidence of meeting of your mind. You're signing up as an acceptance of that offer. But there's rules in managing a contract. There's timelines, something called 3-day rescission, or in some countries they may recommend it as, or recognize it as, the Lemon Law. If you buy something, you got 3 days for the validity of the contract to mature. Even in banking in Canada, you get a mortgage. The bank waits 3 days before it lodges its claim on the back of the title. You need to know a bunch of these mechanisms and how it shows up. So practically speaking, the customs officer, if they're going to do some paperwork, they're going to hand you paper, contract for acceptance. Trouble is, they can and will never state a fact in any of the language. And I could prove it to you on the laws or the rules of language grammar. And then that's a whole other area of learning about grammar. And I'm an authorized coach or trainer in the area of correct sentence. It's actually a global legal jurisdiction called Correct Sentence Structure, Communication, Parse, Syntax, Grammar. And it's lodged, and it has a flag with the United Nations.
Okay. Very interesting stuff here, and in very layman's terms here, when do you think it might come in handy for you again to have your postal stamp in your passport, where it could actually get you out of some time-consuming, frustrating situations?
Right. Well, I carry passport with a postage stamp, so I claim to be captain of the ship of that document. But I carry a package labeled diplomatic pouch when I go through borders, but I also carry it in my own vehicle with me in my country if I'm stopped by the police. Now, again, they're going to do whatever they do. They, might hold a gun to my head and carry me away and lock me in jail for a certain amount of time. They can only do that so far until they collect a signature. We know of people who have been in jail for 72 hours, and they're thrown out the back door with no explanation because they refused to sign the documentation, and they refused any benefit of the imprisonment. They refused to change their clothes and put on the orange jumpsuit or whatever, because that's deemed a benefit, and a judge will have the machine keep rolling if there's any evidence of contract.
But if you don't put that on, they may force you into that.
Well, they may. It's possible you get beat up. All I can say is, in purging oneself of any disease or raising consciousness, sometimes it might hurt a little more before you actually gain your full balance.
And sovereignty.
Sovereignty. It takes some bumps and scratches, and you may bleed a little bit when you learn to ride a bike.
Very good. All right, very, very interesting stuff here. And
what I'd like to throw out is, for people who want to learn more about this, it can be fairly passive. It can be very active as well. But there's a YouTube channel of, I don't know, it's something like 10 YouTube videos called War Castle, WAR hyphen CAST Castle, LES, yeah. And that's kind of like a documentary of what has been done so far in the world in the last 20 years of the fellow and of a number of people who were really the pioneers in this area. Now, there's literally thousands of people worldwide that are gaining knowledge, and I'm part of a group that has a website called fortheredthumbclub.ca. Put it in Google, it'll come up. Now that website is a challenge because communication with lots of people is a challenge. I'm happy to give you my email address and have people contact me directly. I do coaching and training. There's a charge and fee involved for time, but people have been quite surprised in as little as, like I said with the story of the fellow in Australia, as little as 2 weeks, being astounded that all of a sudden the courts operate differently. We've had prosecutors run out of the courtroom when the proper documents are filed. Judges run off the bench when the proper documents are filed.
So in other words, your case very quickly gets put in the too hard basket.
The real litmus test is the whole legal industry is there to operate, harvest, but they do it under the auspices of no liability. Who, me? No. There's no evidence for the amount of pain and suffering that they're doing. Because a prosecutor's, their name doesn't even show up on the charges. A judge, in my country anyway, you'll never be able to get a signed document with a judge's name on it. A secretary signs per blah blah blah. And or the court record that they give you, or the charges, or the court order, the judge's name is just typed out in all capital letters. That's not even a being. It's a ship. So the antidote to that, the kryptonite to what everybody experiences as national Superman, you know, the legal system, courts, police officers, la la la. The kryptonite to that is, I take full liability. You throw an ante in, because a court is a marketplace, just like a poker game. You throw in a significant amount in the pot, full liability, and those that avoid liability run. But so back to the issue of our current viral scare. This is virus. We're, you know, it's crazy. Something's going on back here. What's going on back here is a turning over of the banking system that can't go any longer.
That's right.
The banks have been pushing up against a zero interest rate regime. That tells you should have zero interest in what's going on in here. But there's something going on here to regenerate it all. Now, the amount of suffering that's going to happen here, I mean, economically is more than we even saw, even in the last few weeks, is already more than we saw probably in the Second World War. Because your parents and my parents didn't have schools closed.
No.
Or your grandparents didn't have schools closed during the Second World War. Stuff happens.
It's unsustainable.
But and it's hard to figure out, but those powers that be have probably planned this for generations.
They did. But
not just even a decade or so.
That's that thinning out of the population also.
That's part of it.
They say they want to eliminate 160 million people. Over 160 million
That's
people.
part of it. But if consciousness can be raised, and you find out that, hold it, there is no government without you and
without
me.
Yeah, that's right.
And there is no banking system without your birth certificate being traded in New York.
That's right.
Which is the bond. I'm going to give the email for the video, a website that you can read more about this, and there's a whole set of YouTube videos on really the frontier guy, a fellow named Russell J. Gould. In partnership with a few other people, but they dropped out. Right now he's the last standing. But he has the claim, War Castles reviews this, as Postmaster General of the world. Muster Master of the world, global military. Holder of the flag of the correct sentence structure jurisdiction, where language can be proven as a mathematically correct. He's got a whole Keymaster of the Vatican. These are the power spots, and the term War Castles relates to the three castles: the Vatican for control, London for currency, and the Pentagon for power.
So, I had to have something It's a joke. All of it is a joke.
Well, it's life bubbling over, consciousness raising.
The sheep.
running over the cliff or
Right.
bleeding into the
Right.
pail.
Yeah.
But it's time for correction.
It is.
Hallelujah.
That's right. What's your name?
My name's Maury.
Maury. Well, nice to meet you. Yeah.
Good to meet you.
Okay. Thank you so much for this, and I will put your email address here at the bottom. And guys, if you enjoyed this, please share the video with all your friends, and make sure, if you haven't, subscribe, like, and recommend it around the world. Okay, take care.
Thanks, Mr. T.
Over and out.
Good
See you
work.
later. Cheers.